Hello everybody, this is, I'm Chris Gorgeous, and this is my wife Johnny Gorgeous. We're from ASL Basics, and this evening we thought we would do a quick Q&A with everybody that's part of our group this month, and answer any questions that you may have. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for people to join in, I figured maybe we can just talk about fingerspelling a little bit, and while we talk about that, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in the comments down on the side. Tonight is really going to be just kind of a practice round as far as figuring out how Facebook Live works, and this is all of a learning process for myself, and a lot of this is new. So I would like to do more live streaming events going forward. Just trying to want to familiarize myself with the process, so I wanted to invite everybody that's part of the group to join us this evening, and figure we'll do some Q&As and we'll talk about fingerspelling and hope for the best. So I guess let's just go ahead and start with maybe like 3 tips on fingerspelling, and then we can go from there.
Okay, so when it comes to fingerspelling, especially when you're new, a lot of people have the tendency to bounce. So I'm going to give you an example when I'm going to fingerspell my name. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to fingerspell it. But I want you to catch what I'm doing. Ready? It was kind of hard to see, right? It wasn't clear. Whoa. It's because I was bouncing my hand, and that's a very common thing when you're first learning ASL and you're learning how to fingerspell. You tend to bounce your hand as you spell each letter. So for me, I was going J-O-H-N-N-I. Very common mistake. But try not to move your hand at all. So what I always did when I first started learning, and it helped me so much, was I put my other hand under my elbow, almost like an anchor. So I didn't move. Nope, my hand stays right here. And then I do it. J-O-H-N-N-I. It helps me not to bounce so much. It also helps you to not move. Another common mistake is when you fingerspell. You slide your hand across. And you don't have to do that either. Even if you're fingerspelling multiple words, you don't need to do it like a sentence where it's like this word, that word, this word, that word. No. Same thing with your anchor, and just fingerspell your words. So J-O-H-N-N-I-C-H-R-I-S. So Johnny and Chris. It keeps your hands stable, and it keeps you from sliding, and it keeps you from bouncing. Because the last thing you want when you're trying to fingerspell your name is to have somebody bouncing. That's so hard. It's hard to understand, and it's hard to really grasp what it is you're trying to spell. So that's one tip, is just keep your hands straight. Don't bounce it. Don't slide it. The other thing that I would recommend too when it comes to fingerspelling is a lot of people associate speed with skill. The faster you are, the more skilled you are. Nothing can be farther from the truth. When it comes to speed, speed comes with time. It comes with experience. What you want is clarity. Clarity is skill, not speed. So when you're fingerspelling, it's okay to slow down a little bit and to fingerspell the word you're trying to say, or sign, if you don't know the sign on your finger, or if it's your name. You don't have to be fast, because speed, your fingers get blur, and it's just a blur. And you're like, what was that? Nothing was clear. So if you're fingerspelling a name, C-H-R-I-S. Could I fingerspell that fast? Absolutely, Chris. But nothing I did right now, even though every single letter was correct, it was just a giant blur. It was just my hand. It looked like I just went bloop, real fast. But when you slow down and you're clear, that's what skill looks like. It means you can understand, and you're being so crystal clear about what you're trying to convey. Because that's the point. The point isn't to say, how fast can I do it so I look like I know what I'm doing. The point is your message coming across? Are people able to understand you? That's what you're wanting. You're wanting clarity and understanding, not so much speed to make it appear or for you to feel like you're skilled. Again, speed comes with time and experience, but it has nothing to do with skill. So your skill is your clarity, and I can't stress that enough. There's been so many times when that's happened to where somebody fingerspell something to me really fast, and I'm like, again.
So your skill
And they do it again. Again. But I say this time, slow down.
I see we got a question from Bruce. Are experienced signers actually able to read when you fingerspell so quickly? Yes, and again, you do want to make sure that you are fingerspelling at a speed that is comfortable for the other person. So if you have two deaf people together and they're very fluent signers, they're just going to be fingerspelling through words really quickly, especially if they're going to be fingerspelling things that they already are familiar with. Like if they're talking about friends, they can already kind of contextualize what that fingerspelling is going to be. Like if I were to say, I'm going to fingerspell a car for you, and there's only so many car makes and models, so you're already kind of primed to take in that information. So like let's say I'm going to fingerspell a car, and you hold that first letter a little bit, and then you go through the last, and you hold that last letter a little bit, you're probably going to be able to pick that up really quickly. However, if I didn't tell you what topic it was going to be about or what subject, and it's just out of the blue, all of a sudden I'm talking about fishing, and then I'm talking about Star Wars, it's going to be really hard to kind of pick up the fingerspelling. And so like subject matter can really help with understanding how when somebody else fingerspells quickly. But typically, like, you want to make sure that you're understood, not necessarily if you're fast. And another thing to understand too is like interpreting. If you're an interpreter, you almost have no choice but to really fingerspell through key vocabulary pretty quickly. And again, the deaf student or the deaf client, they're going to be able to comprehend what is being fingerspelled really fast, because they already know what the subject is about. So like if I'm fingerspelling of key vocabulary in a biology class, that student is already primed and ready to get that kind of vocabulary. And so they're going to be able to tell the difference between like mitochondria versus cell. They look very differently. One's a short word, one's a long word, one starts with M, one starts with C. So like you're able to kind of contextualize and understand, like, almost like it looks like one motion. Like you can tell the difference between Peter and John. Even though they're super fast, they almost develop like a sign in of themselves.
It's true. And especially when you are an interpreter, you've already gone over this key vocabulary with your student, so they've already become accustomed to when you're about to fingerspell. And so when it comes to your students, they will pick up on that. But going back to fingerspelling and to your question on if experienced signers actually are able to read when you fingerspell so quickly, it depends also too on who you're talking to. So for example, if me and him are just having a conversation in sign language, and I sit there and I throw out a name or a word and I fingerspell it, because we're with each other and he knows my style of signing and I know his, I will automatically go boop and understand exactly what I'm saying, he's saying, we understand each other. Same thing with my parents. Both of my parents are fluent signers. And if they fingerspell something, because I'm with them and I understand how they sign, how they move, their characteristics, everything about them, or with your really good friend, or even if it's your own student, if you're an interpreter, and they fingerspell, because your mind and your eyes are so accustomed to how they move their hands, you're automatically going to pick it up. But when you're first learning, it's a little more difficult, because then you're not as accustomed to seeing it. So if it's done super fast, you're going to miss it. And that's okay. That's when you ask, please slow down a little bit. I do it all the time. I'll ask, I'm an interpreter. I do this professionally. I've been doing it a very long time. And sometimes my clients will go, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I'll say, I'm so sorry. Can you please spell it again a little bit slower? And so they will, and I'm like, okay, it happens. I mean, nobody's perfect, so we're gonna miss stuff. And that's when you always just ask for the clarity. Do you mind slowing down a little bit, doing it again?
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It's acceptable, and it's okay. But like I said, with experience and practice, your speed will come. It's just the importance of clarity. Sorry, I was listening for my daughter. I heard a noise, and I'm like, what was that? Oh, okay, forget. But that's pretty much all I have as far as fingerspelling. Oh, that's not true. I have one more thing I'm going to add. When it comes to your letters, so many times you'll see a variation in 2 letters that can sometimes be confusing. And those 2 letters are N and M. Sometimes you'll see somebody go in. So my fingers are pointed out. They're not curved down. Same with M. My fingers are pointed out. They're not curved down. Technically, correctly, they curve down. Yes, they do. They're down. But when you see this, they call it the interpreter's in and the interpreter M. Only because when you're going so fast, or not so much fast, let me take that back. When you're interpreting, sometimes when you're far away, like if you're interpreting on stage, if I did this from far away compared to this, sometimes it's hard to differentiate what letter I'm doing from that far away. So over time, it's kind of developed into this boink, point out. It's a little more clear to see that there are, where's my camera? That there are 2 fingers pointing at you, and there are 3 fingers pointing at you from far away.
Yeah, especially if you're doing like a sign like Monday, where the fingers aren't necessarily pointed like right at you, but you can this is very distinguishable compared to this.
Mm-hmm.
And because you have M, N, and T, all with the thumb kind of poking through the fingers, whereas you have T, and then you have N, and then you have M. And that's a lot easier to differentiate. And it's also quicker to produce. So like if you're finger spelling and you almost necessitate speed, then it's actually a little quicker to sign with a straight N or an interpreter N versus a straight M or an interpreter N.
It's true. Are either one technically wrong? No. The point is still made. Mm-hmm. If you look at that, you know exactly what that is. That's an N. You look at that, you know it's an M. You look at this, it's an N. You look at this, it's an M. So it's just another variation. But to sign it properly, the way it will be taught to you is it does curve down. This is just a habit that just develops over time. If I was to teach somebody the alphabet, of course I would teach them in M the proper way. When I'm signing out of habit, I'll just go boop, and that's just, so if you see that, that's what it is. So not to be confused and be like, what? No, it is an N, and it is an M.
Yeah, so Bruce is asking another question. Being new to learning ASL, a lot of the signing videos I watch are at a slow speed. Is that okay to do, or will that eventually hinder my progress? Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. So if you go to a sign language class, a lot of times they'll tell you to kind of go at a little bit faster than you're comfortable with. And that's really to kind of challenge yourself, because if you always watch a finger spelling at a very slow speed, almost like glacial, if it's just one letter at a time, like C, wait, H, wait, R, wait, I, and your brain almost needs to be trained to process that information quicker. And so you almost have to challenge yourself. It's like, training yourself for a sport. If you never quite push yourself up to that next level, if you don't lift that extra weight, you're never going to build and develop those muscles, or you're not going to build and develop that those skills. And so, if you can, it doesn't have to be warp speed where it's a blur and you don't understand anything and you have to play it one frame at a time. But it is a good practice to watch videos at a slightly faster rate than you're comfortable with, and that's going to help train and process.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, baby.
It's going to help train and process your brain to process that information much faster.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking to somebody and somebody's signing to you, they're not going to sign at that slow pace that your mind might be used to. They're going to sign normally. When we were first learning and we were watching sign language videos, we slowed them down to make sure. But then we would increase the speed and then increase the speed until eventually we were at a normal pace. And it's like he said, when you're training for a sport. Years ago, me and him both used to do CrossFit. And one of the things that our coach would make us do was increase our weight. I was comfortable with the weight I was at. I was doing pretty good. And he was like, no. And he'd tack on an extra 20 pounds. But what he was doing was training my muscles to get stronger and to be able to handle that extra weight. And the same thing when it comes to learning sign language and you're watching those videos. You start out at a lighter weight or at a slower pace, and then you get comfortable with it and you're like, okay, I'm understanding. Kick it up a speed. And then kick it up a speed. And you're exercising and strengthening your receptive skills, your brain, your eyes, to fully understand what's happening at a more normal speed. So eventually you're going to get to the point where it can just be regular speed and you're going to watch it good. I've gotten to the point now to where I can have something at a fast speed and watch it, and I feel like the information just flows over me. And I can just sit there and process everything that's being said. And again, it all comes in time.
I heard her.
But it all comes with time. And it comes with practice. So just keep slowly trying to increase your speed. It's okay that it's not at regular speed. It really is. Because you're going to get there. It's just going to take time. So you just want to keep training your mind and your eyes and your receptive skills, and you're going to get stronger, more confident, and then you're going to be able to get to that point where you can watch anything in sign language at a full speed. We discussed fingerspelling and the different tips and tricks about fingerspelling. Your question about fast and slow watching videos. I thought there was something else I was going to say.
I wouldn't mind backtracking a little bit to the variations in letters that you'll see in the ASL alphabet. We did cover N and M.
Hey, go, Daddy.
Thank you, baby.
Another one that you'll see variations on is E. So, like, if you look on a chart or a picture of the ASL alphabet, a lot of them have it like this, like where the thumb is flush with the other four fingers. Now, a lot of people, deaf and interpreters, will actually sign E like this, where there's a gap between the thumb and the other four fingers. It's referenced as like a screaming E,
Mine is so big.
Like your hand is screaming. So like sometimes that gap is small, and sometimes that gap gets really big.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of guilty of having a screaming E.
Me too. Me too. I am. When I do my E's, it looks like this. Mine is like as big as you can get.
And it's funny because
I don't even know what to say to that. It's just that's I don't know.
Yeah, and last year I got to work with a deaf interpreter, and she had such a strong opinion about that screaming E because she used the screaming E, and she went to go take the I think it was either the ESSE or the EITA certification for interpreting, and she used the screaming E, and she got criticized on it.
Yeah.
So mad.
She
was like,
yeah, she had a very strong opinion on the matter. But honestly, these variations don't really matter because most people that are familiar with sign language, even beginners, typically are familiar with the N or the N, the M or the M, or the E or the E or the E. And also, I was just watching this video from a Canadian signer, and they said that it's pretty common in Canada for them to sign their E with their thumb a little to the side, like that. Which, like, that was completely new to me. I've never seen that. And we've met deaf from all over the country.
I've never seen it like.
But yeah, like you'll see these variations here and there, and and then there are sometimes wrong letters. Like sometimes people will do A like this. That's not how you sign A. A is more like
Your
this.
thumb's closed.
Your thumb is closed, and it's touching your index finger, whereas if it's out like this, that's too far. So you want to make sure that your A is like this. And then Z is kind of a tricky one too, because if you're looking at a chart, it's always that you're looking at the palm facing you, and it's not your palm facing away from you. So you look at the picture, and it looks like Z. But do you draw the Z in your perspective or for the perspective of the person watching you? And so it can be a little tricky. So honestly, you'll see it both ways.
I've never thought about that.
So like for myself and most people, like I'd probably say maybe 70. I mean, these are kind of made up figures based off my perspective, but like 70-80% of people will probably sign Z like this from your perspective, because you're drawing the Z in a mid-air. But there are some that will sign it the other way around, where it's Z in the perspective of the person watching you.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even think about that. I draw it from my perspective. It's a Z, but I never thought about it from the perspective of my clients or anybody who's looking at me that I'm doing the Z backwards. But well, anyways, that was new information for me. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, fingerspelling, that's a deep rabbit hole that you can jump down, and we've been doing this for well over a decade, and we're still learning things about fingerspelling, and
like the letter Z.
Like the letter Z, or like I just learned the Canadian E is a thing, and
so crazy.
What else? I was reading a sign language book by a coder that was from Gallaudet, and he has this whole book about fingerspelling. And like common mistakes and ways to sign double letters. That's kind of a really big thing, to where how do you sign a word that has two letters in a row? Let's see here real quick. What is it called when one signs all the words instead of proper ASL? What are your thoughts on that? Ooh, that's another rabbit hole.
When
I think he's referring to PSE or C sign, when you're signing every word in an English sentence.
Oh, like if I was to say, like, for example, I went to the store, like that, like where I'm like literally signing every single word, or like, if you can, please do not do that, where it's like that instead of, yes. Okay, thank you. So, how do I start that?
Okay, so yeah, it's a deep rabbit hole too, because there's a lot of different modes of sign language, and basically you can boil it down to three. There's a section of sign language called manually coded English, and that's one where you might be familiar with hearing the acronym C sign, SEE, which is an acronym for Signed Exact English. And so what that basically is you're signing every word in a sentence, including prefixes and suffixes. So you would say like shopping and instead of just shop. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum of ASL, where you have that proper grammar, that syntax. It omits articles. It's a much more direct line of communication, and it doesn't have a, and, it. So like a lot of those little small words that don't really have meaning all by themselves, but they are usually attached to another word. And then there's PSE, which is kind of in the middle, to where you are using ASL signs, and you're not including articles, but you're still signing in the English grammar. So just like a real quick, I am going to the store. Like if you're just doing that in ASL, usually it's just like store, I go out, or store, I go. It's real simple. And if you were to do that in signed exact English, it would be I am going to the store. And like it's not only it's longer to sign, but it's also not as clear if you don't understand what a means, or ing. Like those don't, like you can't really show a picture of, hey, this is what ing is, this is what a is. It's not a noun, right? It's not something that you can physically show. Right. So in ASL, those words just get tossed out, and even in PSE. And so PSE, that sentence would be more of like I am going. So you don't say am. So I go store. That's it. But it's following that English grammar, but you're omitting the articles and the signs that would typically not be signed in ASL.
Yeah, so with
Hopefully that's not too confusing.
So pretty much C sign includes all the ings and all of that, and it's signed word for word. PSE is the signs of ASL just put in the English grammar, and then ASL follows the ASL grammar. We were actually going to talk about that, and we will. We're going to talk about that Wednesday night during the group session, because
what are you talking about?
The difference between C sign,
okay.
ASL, and PSE, because what ends up happening is people hear about it. C sign, what's that? Or
and sometimes they'll think of like the letter C,
yes,
like
C
sign.
sign.
It's like C, S-E-E.
C sign. So we're going to discuss that Wednesday night at the end of the group session, to discuss the variations of sign language. Because there's a lot out there. And there's the manually coded English. That's the one where you're at your face, correct?
Well, so manually coded English is kind of an umbrella to where you have other signed exact English systems. So signed exact English is one of the manually coded English
okay, then I'm
versions.
thinking of the other one that I can't remember the name of then.
And there's also one where it's called pantomiming, and that's basically gestures, or like you're acting out a story, and that actually overlaps all three of those.
Right.
So like if you're pretending to run, that's more of a pantomime. It's not necessarily like a sign for run. So yeah, it's a really deep rabbit hole you can jump into as far as like all the different modes of sign languages. But like if you can just remember the three main ones, ASL, PSE, and C sign, SEE, then that will give you a pretty decent idea. And honestly, usually you'll only see ASL and PSE these days. C sign is kind of a dying language, and an older generation will still
old school.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the older deaf, that's what they grew up using. The newer generations, you don't typically see it, but it is still out there. But if you take your certification test to be an interpreter, you're tested, at least with your ESSE, you're tested on all three. C sign, ASL, and PSE. They test you on all three for your receptive. You only have to pass one, but you are tested on all three. So, oh my.
You're stuck, huh?
But as far as that, I think we've covered what we were going to discuss today. This was a good trial run to kind of figure everything out again, because we've never done Facebook Live, so it's like, okay, how is this going to work? But I did like this. So
yeah, and I do appreciate everybody that was able to show up, and Bruce, I really appreciate all the questions, and yeah, this was a good test run, and we're kind of Facebook newbies here, so we're still trying to figure out everything, and I wasn't sure. Live streaming is a super new thing. We've never done it before, so that's why I really appreciate all of you that have been able to make it this evening to help us kind of get a feel for what live streaming is kind of about and what we can do with it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do a larger event in the future.
I know this one was a little short notice for a lot of people, because we decided yesterday, hey, we should do a Facebook Live. Well, let's do it Saturday afternoon. So it was like really short notice for everybody. But the next time we do one, which I'm not too sure how often we're going to do them. If they're going to be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, we haven't decided yet. We were kind of curious how this would go.
Yeah, maybe we'll pitch it to the group that we meet on Wednesday, which, well, we'll probably have a pretty sizable group. And again, if you're watching this now, or if you're watching this on the replay, if there is a replay, then we'll be doing a class and practice session this coming Wednesday. It's going to be on the, what is it going to be, the 29th, I think it is. 5 o'clock Pacific time. If you're on the East Coast, and 8 o'clock, and if you're in a Central Time Zone, I'm sure you know how to calculate it. Very informative. I enjoyed the session. Well, thanks, Bruce.
You.
And go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, once we have all of it kind of figured out a little better, we are going to be pitching it to everybody about what they would like us to discuss, because if it's left up to us, we'll talk about everything, and it will be a very long Facebook Live, especially if I'm talking, because I will ramble. So we are going to pitch it to everybody to be like, okay, this week, what would you guys like to discuss? What's on your mind? What do you have questions about? What have you seen? What has somebody told you recently? Are you struggling with something personally when it comes to learning sign language? And if it is a personal matter, I don't want you to think that we're going to say, so we got this question from so-and-so who's struggling with this. No, this is a very generic, we've heard that there are some who have been struggling with da-da-da-da-da. Nobody will ever be called out like that, especially if it's something that they are personally struggling with, like if it's self-esteem when it comes to sign language, or how do I build my self-confidence, or I was just attacked by somebody saying that I was signing wrong or that I wasn't a good signer, things like that. We would never call you out on that to say so-and-so is having this problem. That's not cool because a lot of people don't like that. So I don't want you to ever be afraid to let us know, like, hey, I'm struggling with this, to worry that we're going to let people know that you're struggling with it. If it is a topic that you want discussed, just let us know. And again, everything is, what's the word when you don't say it? When you don't say who it's from? Confidential? Not confidential. Anonymous. Yeah, I'm not good with the words, but so everything is labeled anonymous unless you say, hey, I'm cool with you saying that I asked this question. So just let us know. We're definitely going to be asking everybody, what do you think? What do you want to talk about? And then we'll probably do these in 30-minute sections. So it'll be like 30
minutes is pretty. I think that went pretty well. I think 30 minutes is a good chunk of time.
To get a lot of information across, too. So I think that's it. But if you're watching this and you have any suggestions, if you have experience with Facebook Live and Facebook stuff, feel free to contact us and be like, hey, I noticed this. I would change this. Hey, again, open, accepting to any type of feedback that you guys might have. We're so new when it comes to Facebook and this kind of thing. We welcome it. It's totally okay. So just let us know if, like, oh, I have experience with it. This worked for me, or I noticed this. Maybe try doing it this way. That's totally cool with us. Yeah, let us know. Help us out. Be very grateful. So I guess that's pretty much it. Again, I will keep talking, so I have to be stopped.
Alrighty, so again, thank you for making it tonight, and if you're watching this on the replay, hopefully you found this informative, and if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're both active on Facebook and on Instagram at ASL Basics, and you can always email us and all of that stuff. If we don't see you, perhaps we can see you on Wednesday on any of our practice sessions, which is a great place if you're learning language, or if you're, even if you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced. There are lots of students that are joining us at different levels, and we pair people up with similar skills to level, so you can have another human being to practice sign language with. And I know that can be a struggle for a lot of students, that they don't have people to practice with.
And for those who are watching, and if you're going to be tuning in with us on Wednesday night for the group session, we do have an announcement that we are going to make. I'm not going to spoil it, but we do have an announcement that we're going to make at the end of the group session. As you all know, that... Well, you know what? No, I'm not going to say it.
That's it.
And that's it. So, anyway.
Hope to see you Wednesday, and if you can't make it, then
Wednesday.
we'll let you know what the announcement was.
Yeah.
And until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.